What's going on, everybody? Good morning. It is 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time here on this Thursday, January 9th, 2019. Yes, I know the music is still going. Relax. It'll be over in just a second. This is called an intro, ladies and gentlemen, an intro. Hey, you know what I'm talking about today? That's right, The Last Jedi. Ray, are you excited to talk about The Last Jedi?
Yes, I am, Dave. Yes, I am.
That's right, we're talking The Last Jedi today because I want to get this out of the way and over with. Now, so let's just jump right into it. So today's topic, of course, is how The Last Jedi destroyed the Star Wars sequel trilogy. Now, for those of you that maybe don't watch me on a regular basis, or even those of you that do, or maybe you're new to the channel, let me preface this show by saying this. There isn't anything you are going to say. Now, I've said this in my most recent Rise of Skywalker videos. There's nothing you're going to say that in regards to Disney and Star Wars, and they should have done this and they should have done that, and why didn't they do this? There should have been a plan, and then the fuck Disney and goddamn Star Wars and J.J. Abrams, the fuck Ryan. There's nothing you're going to say that about 90% of I'm going to agree with. There's probably going to be always about 10% I'm like, I think you're overreaching there. I think that's a little unnecessary. But at the end of the day, there really isn't anything that you're going to say that I don't actually agree with and go, yeah, I totally get it. The comments section below is going to be full of just, well, they didn't have a plan, and they changing the Star Wars, the Mandalorian's way better. It's going to be all down there. I totally get it. I understand. So let me just say that I get it. You might want to save, your breath, unless it makes you feel better. So the other thing is that the reason why I'm doing this video and I'm diving a bit deeper is because in my Rise of Skywalker videos, I touched on this, but I sort of held back by going a bit deeper because I wanted to focus on the Rise of Skywalker. So that's why I decided, you know what, let me do a show getting this out of the way, and then we can move on to more important, interesting things. Think I'm still live? Oh, weird. Okay. Oh, wait. No, there we go. I don't know what happened there. I don't know why OBS did that. I hope it's not going to do it through the entire stream. That would really suck, and I have no idea why. But anyway, yeah, we lost him still here. Yeah, I don't know what's going on there. Hopefully it will not do that. Hopefully it will not continue to do that. But we'll see. We'll see how this goes. All right, weird. Yeah, it is weird. I'm telling you. I don't know what the hell is going on. I'm only using 2.5% of my CPU. So, I don't know. Hey, it happens, right? So this is... let's dive into it. So there's going to be a few things for those of you that watch me on a regular basis you've heard me say before, but it bears repeating. So let's just see if we can get through this as quickly as possible. You might notice a bit of lag in the stream. OBS seems to be acting up again. I don't know why, but we're gonna truck through this. So now, I'm somebody that, of course, actually really enjoyed The Force Awakens. I thought it was what Star Wars needed to be to get Star Wars back on track. I loved it. I thought it was great. I didn't love everything about it. I certainly didn't think it was the greatest thing, of all time. The original trilogy is still far and above the best. But at the end of the day, it was what it needed to be to get Star Wars back on track. And I really enjoyed the feeling I had watching that movie. It felt like a Star Wars movie. It looked like a Star Wars movie for the first time in like 32 years at that point. But I didn't agree with every creative decision that was made. Certainly there were things in there that I would not have done. And certainly things that I did not agree with and would have done a bit differently. But I think at the end of the day, like I said, it was what it needed to be, considering where we were coming from with the loathing of the prequels. Now, the prequels, in retrospect, are sort of, people look at them more favorably, and that's probably because of The Last Jedi and where Disney has sort of taken things. But in 2014 and in 2015, Although there were prequel fans, certainly not everybody enjoyed the Star Wars prequels. I mean, let's not forget that they were, if social media had existed in 1999 and 2002 and 2005, the same toxicity that currently exists in the world of Star Wars fandom would have existed then. And when I say toxicity, I'm not talking about people who just didn't like the movie. I'm talking about those who have a vested interest in seeing something fail. It's become almost a business for them. That's what I'm talking about. Okay, I'm not talking about people who have difference of opinions and can actually objectively quantify and articulately express, in a very articulate manner, their thoughts of reasons why they didn't like what they liked. That's not what I'm talking about. Okay, and again, if you notice a bit of a lag, I apologize. OBS is acting up. I have no idea why. It's strange, but we're gonna truck through it. So. Hopefully the audio is okay, because as the saying goes, people are more likely to watch crappy video and good audio than crappy audio and good video. So hopefully the audio is at the very least all right. Okay, so this is the problem with the Star Wars sequel trilogy. Yes, they should have had a plan. I agree with all that. They should have had a plan, but they didn't. J.J. Abrams delivered an acceptable first act of a story. The Star Wars stories are 3-act plays. And the first act in a 3-act play is your introduction. You get introduced to the conflict. You get introduced to your main characters. You get introduced to the foundation of the narrative that is being set. Your second act in a 3-act play is always the darkest for our protagonists, right? It is where our main characters face the most resistance. It doesn't end well. It doesn't go well. Usually the second act of a 3-act play has the most depth and the most layers and the most sort of all hope is lost, so to speak, for our main protagonist or protagonists, depending on whether if it's, an ensemble piece or not. The bad guys tend to get the upper hand and tend to sort of win for all intents and purposes in a second act. And then your third act is the redemption piece, the resolution, where sort of the lessons that they've learned in the second act carry over into the third act, and they're reminded of those things and the struggles that they've gone through in the second act that they fact can overcome, the resistance that they felt during that struggle that they were facing in the second act, and they rise above it and blah, 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 blah. We know how these things go. The Star Wars universe is a fairy tale. Okay, and at the end of the day, we know how these things, are going to go. It's just exciting to see it unfold. So The Force Awakens, whether you liked it or not, whether you agreed with the creative decisions or not, whether you thought it was too similar to A New Hope or not, whether you thought it was the greatest Star Wars movie of all time or not, becomes irrelevant at the end of the day when you look at The Force Awakens from the 3-act structure process. It's a good first act. It might not be your cup of tea, but looking at it at face value, it does what a first act needs to do. After The Force Awakens came out, became one of the highest grossing films of all time. The excitement was amazing. And yes, were there people that didn't like it? Of course. Were there people that thought it was too similar to A New Hope? Sure. Were there people that thought but the toxicity that now exists in the world of Star Wars fandom. And again, I'm not talking about, people who can objectively, maturely, articulate why they didn't like something. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the vitriol that exists in the world of Star Wars fandom. That didn't, it's always sort of been there in pockets, but it didn't exist like it does now after The Force Awakens. There were people that didn't like it. There were people that were like, fuck, that's bullshit, dog shit, whatever the case is. But on the mass scale that it is now, it wasn't there. And that's primarily because I think even if they don't realize it, on a subconscious level, those who maybe weren't particularly fond of The Force Awakens, understood that it did what it needed to do. It might not have been your cup of tea, but, it was a solid first act. It was a solid, we're back, let's see where this goes. Again, for those of you that are just joining us, or maybe you're watching after the fact, OBS is acting up a little bit here. So you might notice a bit of a lag, but hopefully the audio will be okay. I don't know why it's doing this. The second day in a row it's doing this. It was doing this during my Patreon live stream last night, so it's strange. I don't really know, because everything seems to be okay. Might be OBS. So when The Last Jedi came out, the anticipation around that movie was not quite as high as The Force Awakens, but it was very high because it was exciting to see where this is going to go. Because Daisy Ridley, John Boyega, Oscar Isaac, great actors, the chemistry between them fantastic, especially Rey and Finn. And Kylo Ren was an interesting, complex, conflicted character. A lot of people were angry or made fun of the fact that he was this, quote unquote, whiny little baby. Well, okay, if you want to sort of say it like that, yes, he's not his grandfather. That is the whole point. He was never going to be like Darth Vader. He wanted to be like Darth Vader. That was his goal, right? Because of the manipulation that Snoke, later Palpatine, was pulling on him. But he was never set up to be Darth Vader. I mean, that's a different level. Kylo Ren was a very conflicted human being, and that was interesting, The Last Jedi was the single most disappointing experience of my movie-going life. And the reason for that is not because my 40-year-old fanboy expectations were not met, but because The Last Jedi didn't deliver on what a second act is supposed to do. And the reason that I can only speculate, but because we know, we don't know, but the probability is quite high just by the execution of everything and the drama that was existing behind the scenes in Lucasfilm, that there was no plan. Now, we know that J.J. Abrams wrote a script with Lawrence Kasdan. He wrote the first act, and he had story notes and ideas of where it was going to go. All directors do. Well, unless you're what's-his-face from Halloween 5. That was anyway, it's a whole other show. Maybe I'll talk about that tomorrow. But generally, when you're writing a script and you know that you're not going to be the second man in, you leave notes, ideas of what you're thinking. Now, that doesn't mean that the second man in has to do verbatim what you're saying. But if you're the second man or woman, I say man in a general sense, if you're the second person in, generally speaking, you're not supposed to take the foundation of everything and toss it out and start again or go this way. You have to honor what's come before, whether you agree with it or not. And you have to, because you're the second person in, and you've agreed to be the second person in, you've signed a contract, right? And, and then you take that and you elevate it to the next level. You don't toss things out and begin again. The second act, as you heard me say earlier, has a very specific ingredient to it. And when you look at The Last Jedi, it's structured in a way that feels like another first act. Because what Rian Johnson did, and we know this, is that he didn't do anything that J.J. Abrams had in his story notes. He threw it all out. And although there's no evidence of this, I'm sure you would agree that at the end of the day, I can't help but feel that, and it plays out that way because it's so ridiculous what happened that it doesn't feel organic. And you can't help but feel that these creative decisions were made for nothing more than to subvert expectations, to be avant-garde for the sake of being avant-garde, which just simply means, taking risks and, artistic sort of liberties for the, you know what, it just simply means going in unusual and experimental directions. I can't help but feel, because it's so strange, and it's like I'm watching a completely different film. I can't help but feel that this was a deliberate creative choice just to throw the fans off. Well, hang on a sec here. Now, the fans think we're going to do this, obviously, because of the way JJ set it all up. So why don't we just completely 180 and do this? Well, okay, but hang on a second here. Is it organic? Does it feel organic to what's come before? Because when you're the second person in, you have to honor what's come before. You can't toss the lightsaber over the shoulder, kill your main, antagonist, and then, split up everybody and have everybody going off over here. And then Luke, I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm passionate about this. Okay. So, again, it's not 40-year-old fanboy expectations that were not met. It's serious structure issues when we talk about the second act of a 3-act play. Let's take the character of Luke, right? Now, there were fanboy expectations out there that people wanted to see Luke tear some shit up. I get it. I understand that. I'm actually one that really liked that Luke was a hermit on the island. I liked that. And, you can blame J.J. Abrams for putting him on the island, but J.J. Abrams didn't create the reason he was on the island. That's Rian Johnson. J.J. Abrams, the reason we got in the Force Awakens was from Han Solo. Now, whether that's true or there's more to it, obviously, that's a different case. But Han Solo basically says that Luke, disappeared after one of his students went awry and blah, blah, blah. And he went searching for the lost Jedi temple, or, whatever the case is, whatever Han says there, right? Okay. And that's as far as we get. Okay. Interesting. All right. But it's Rian Johnson that gives you the justification for why he's cut himself off from everybody, including his sister. Not going back and saving his sister, not going back to fight with the resistance, not going back to be there. And when you look at the character of Luke throughout the original trilogy, and when you look at the actual development of the character traits, what was created, the tiny nuances and idiosyncrasies that are created within the character of Luke and his arc from A New Hope to Empire to the Return of the Jedi, and you look at the morals and the learning curve that character would have gone through by saving his father, understanding the power of the dark side, understanding how it all works. And, you understand where that character is at the end of Return of the Jedi to where he was at the beginning of A New Hope. It doesn't, and because we don't get to see anything after that, it feels strange that Luke would cut himself off from the Force, and the justification is he felt something within his nephew, and his nephew teared shit up, so that totally cut him off from the Force. He went there to die. Fuck his sister. Fuck Han Solo. I didn't feel anything because I cut myself off from the Force. It doesn't feel organic. It feels synthetically created for nothing more than to subvert expectations, because of what Luke would have learned by the experience with his own father. And so it feels strange that Luke is not on the island, but the reasons and how deep he's gone into despair and into sort of, just fuck everything, I don't care anymore, it doesn't feel organic. I don't believe it. And part of the reason why I may not believe it is because we didn't see this downfall. And that's not JJ's fault, because JJ didn't create the depths of the reasons of why he's there or cut himself off from the Force. JJ didn't say he cut himself off from the Force. It's a Rian Johnson creation. And because we didn't see anything, we didn't have the opportunity to see Luke and see this downfall and have it sold to us in a very organic way, a very believable way. I don't buy this. I don't buy that. It's not that Luke wouldn't have gone to search for the Jedi Temple, or maybe he would have been feeling a little like, fuck, oh my God, I feel a bit guilty. Holy shit, he was my responsibility. Of course. But because of the lessons he's learned, because of the values he holds, because of the responsibility that he has, I don't believe that he would go that far. It just, I don't buy it. And it doesn't play out as organic to me. It feels shoehorned in. It feels like they're expecting Luke to be like this, so we're just going to make him like this. That's how it plays out. I don't buy it. When it comes to the character, and you know, a perfect example of that is look at the end. And again, for those of you that are joining, if there's a bit of lag, I do apologize. OBS seems to be acting up, but we're going to truck through it. And again, it's I like that Luke was on the island, but the depths that they went to and the justification for it, I just don't believe. I didn't buy it. When you look at the when you look at the let me take a swig of water. It's what happens when you're talking a lot. When you look at the look on Luke Skywalker's face at the end of The Force Awakens, look at his face. Look at Luke Skywalker's face at the end of The Force Awakens. The pain. He's feeling something. The direction that JJ gave Mark Hamill when he turns around and he takes off his hood and he's standing there and the music is building to that crescendo, and it's, it's that shot and, she's holding out the lightsaber, and he's looking at it like the look on his face. He doesn't have to say anything, the look on his face says it all. He's probably feeling the death of Han, which according to Ryan, he didn't. But the pain on his face, he's feeling something. He's feeling something. That's not a man that's cut himself off from the Force. That's not a man that's not feeling anything. He looks like he's on the verge of crying, like he's just lost his dog, his cat, or his best friend. When you jump to the beginning of The Last Jedi, that face is gone. Completely gone, 100%. Oh. Wait. There we go. I think we're back. Yep, we're back. Okay. Yeah, I don't know what's going on there and why it's doing that. Very strange. Okay. We're back. It's very annoying. When you see his face at the beginning of The Last Jedi, it's completely different. The beginning of The Last Jedi should have opened going right back to that moment. It shouldn't have begun with Poe and the ships and the dropping of the bombs and all that kind of stuff. It was anticlimactic. We wanted to go right back to that moment. That's a creative thing that you could go either way on. It doesn't really, affect whether or not TLJ is a good second act or not. But that's just something that I think they should have done, to go right back to that moment. But taking the lightsaber and tossing it over the shoulder, again, I don't believe Luke would have done that. Why don't I believe he would have done that? Because that was his father's lightsaber. And the lessons that he's learned from his father that have brought him forward, that have propelled him forward to become the Jedi that he is, I don't believe that he would have done that. The last time he saw that was when he was on Bespin. So I just don't believe, that this strange girl shows up on the island, hands him a lightsaber he hasn't seen in, 40 years or 35 years, and he just takes it and tosses it over his shoulder. I don't believe it. I don't believe that Luke would do that because of the lessons that he's learned. When we talk about Rey and the character of Rey, who's our central character, our central focus, and the character of Kylo Ren. Both of them are our central focus. Rey, in this second act, because you've made Luke who he is, okay, so let's say Luke is that way. Okay, so that's what we're going with. I don't have a say, okay? Okay, Dave, we know you want Luke to be like this. You like that he's on the island, but you don't believe, the justification, blah, blah, blah. Too bad. That's what we're going with. Okay. All right, that's what we're going with, right? I don't get a say. And they decide to, go with Luke the way we saw him. Okay. Rey then should have had more resistance. She's our central character. Because this is the second act of a 3-act play, Rey should have then been more tempted by the dark side and gone with Kylo Ren. Now, I don't mean she's turned to the dark side. I just mean because this is the second act of a 3-act play, and we're not getting anything from Luke in terms of this. Although he's dark, sure, but he's not dark. He's moody and drunk and depressed. You know what I mean? Anyway, Rey, what's her arc up to this point? Right? Rey is looking for her place in all this. She doesn't know where she comes from. She can't remember who her parents are. She thinks Luke is the one that's going to show her her place in all this. So when she goes and meets Luke, he turns out to be a bust, an absolute bust, right? Because he's not what she thought he was going to be, and he doesn't want to train her and all that kind of jazz. So she's really disappointed by that. That should affect her huge. That the last remaining Jedi in the galaxy doesn't want to have anything the fuck to do with her. That sucks. That's harsh, especially when she shows some, potential. And she'd give him, fuck your dad's lightsaber. Don't you want to know where I got it? Like, what the fuck, right? When she goes to see Kylo Ren before the killing of Snoke, she's going because she believes that Ben, there's good in Ben, right? Okay. When Kylo kills Snoke, we'll talk about that in a second, but when he kills Snoke and Rey, and he says, come with me, blah, 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 blah. After he's just told her, that your parents were nobodies. They were junk traders that sold you for drinking money or whatever he said. At that moment, really at the end of the day, Rey should have gone with Ren. Now, that doesn't mean that she's being turned. I mean, we know how these fairy tales go, right? But that's how your second act ultimately should have ended. Not at that moment in that scene. I'm just saying that with that uncertainty. Because the only one in the galaxy that seems to give a shit about her is Kylo Ren. For better or worse, right or wrong, he's the one that's taken an interest in her, right? For obvious reasons. Luke doesn't give a fuck about her. It doesn't seem like Han did. Although Han kind of did, but he's dead, right? She doesn't know. She's struggling to find her place in all this, and there's one guy that actually seems to care, and that's Kylo Ren. And he's manipulating her, right? He's using, the dark side of the Force to manipulate her and to believe that, listen, you belong with me. I can complete your training. Don't listen to these fucking people and this, that, and the other and all that kind of stuff. That's interesting. That's conflict for our main protagonist. That's resistance that she's facing. That's a complicated decision that she's facing in the second act. That's very dark. The darkest moment for our main protagonist. But does that happen? No, it doesn't. Instead, she goes, "Oh, Ben, don't do this. Please, come on." That doesn't make any sense. I don't understand why she... And then she just fucks off, and then 15 minutes later, she just suddenly appears on Crate in the Falcon with Chewie. Nothing happened. Nothing happened, right? The killing of Snoke. The killing of Snoke felt like something that was done for no other reason than to surprise the audience. I think it was a mistake to do that. I don't think they should have done that, or Ryan should have done that. But I think he did that because he wanted to surprise the audience and he wanted to give Kylo Ren a platform to become a big baddie. Okay, well, cool. The problem is, if you knew the type of character that Kylo Ren was, then you should have been developing him that way, you know, to be the kind of character that could be worthy of Supreme Leader. The problem is that he was never going to be the most respected, baddest villain in the galaxy because he's conflicted, and he was written that way by J.J. Abrams. He was always going to be a number 2. That doesn't mean that he can't get more powerful and that he can't, you know, trick certain people or, you know, whatever the case is. But he's too and I like that about him. I like that he's conflicted and that, you know, he wants to. I mean, that's ultimately why he killed his father. I mean, let's not forget that Snoke said, "Even you have never faced such a test." Master of the Knights of Ren. I mean, he murdered his father because he wanted to be like his grandfather. And he knew that if I murder my father, then that might get me the respect from people. That's why he did it. When he said in The Force Awakens, I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it. Can you help me? He's telling his dad, I know what I have to do. I have to kill you. But I don't know if I have the strength to do it. Can you help me? And that's why when he stabs his dad, he says, thank you. And then, of course, it's reversed in The Rise of Skywalker to mean something, to actually mean I want to go, you know, and be good and that kind of stuff. It's a beautiful arc there. So back to, you know, Ren and Rey is that what really should have happened. And when I say should have, I'm not saying it has to be done this way. I'm just thinking about how the second act of a 3-act play goes. Really, at the end of the day, if I was writing this, I would have suggested Rey needs to go with Ren because this is just going to bring this whole thing down. But it felt like, no, we need to lift everybody up. We have to show that everybody can be a Jedi. It doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter your sex. It doesn't matter whether you have, you know, whether you're a Kenobi or a Skywalker or a, you know, whatever the case. You can have, okay, well, that's great. Save that for the third act. Save that for the resolution and the redemption because that's what you would want at the end of that. I left the theater watching The Last Jedi confused. It ended on hope and prosperity and Broom Boy and it was weird. It was a very strange feeling I had leaving the theater knowing that I'm watching the second act of a 3-act play. I didn't care about what happened next. It felt like it was the end of the trilogy. You know, even though there were a lot of loose ends, like what happened, you know, to Ren and Rey and all, but it just felt strange. It was a very strange, peculiar middle chapter that just felt like it was setting things up again. Do you know what I mean? Like it was very weird. So really my suggestion was always to keep in line with the second act of a 3-act play is that Rey should have gone with Ren. And then when they go to Crate, keep that there, have Luke Skywalker actually show up. Now, as cool as the Force projection is, and I will give it that, there were some cool things in there. The Force projection is cool, no doubt. But sacrifice that maybe for the third movie or something. And what I would have done is I would have had Luke actually showed up. I would have had him raise his X-Wing, not in The Rise of Skywalker, although that's cool. I would have had him do it in The Last Jedi because it's almost foreshadowed that may happen because we see it in the ocean. Right? Now, obviously, it happens in The Rise of Skywalker, but what I'm saying is that would have been a nice full circle for that character if he was doing that to go to Crate. You know, he's got to fucking get back in this action. Now, is it still cool what he did? Sure, okay, fine, but I think this would have been more organic and in line of what maybe people would have expected from this character. And now I understand that in The Last Jedi, it's pretty much alluded to the fact that, well, he can't because it's broken and it's in the ocean and that's just fucking it. I get that, but I'm just saying you can rewrite that shit. So when the Battle of Crate is happening, Rey is actually with Ren in Ren's ship, looking out at everybody, including Luke Skywalker. And when you hear Poe, do you remember when, I think it was Poe, or somebody said, hang on, there's a ship coming in now. Aaron Click says, but I still sense a 40-year-old fanboy's disliking. Well, sorry, buddy, but unfortunately, what I'm talking about here is actually structure issues, not 40-year-old fanboy expectations. I don't care how it's done. It's just, it should be done in a manner that's indicative of a 3-act play. And when you understand the 3-act structure, you understand that The Last Jedi is more of another first act than it is a second act. And that's what I'm talking about. And then I'm offering suggestions. You don't have to do it this way. I couldn't care less how it's done. I just want the structure to be there. So I offer a suggestion. Here's one way of doing it. And one way of doing it to make it feel organic would be to have Rey go with Ren. Right? And then she's there in his ship looking out, feeling like really she should be down there helping her friends, but she's so enticed by this guy, right? And he's yelling, fire at him, shoot at him. And Luke actually arrives, gets out of his X-Wing, and Ren and Luke actually have a physical confrontation. Not just a beyond the stars sort of thing. So it's one of those things where it's like at the end of the day, I don't care how it's done. I care about if it feels organic. Do I believe that this is what would be happening based on what has been set up? It would be like watching a television show and you get used to a character over 4 seasons. And then in the 5th season, they completely do a 180, but you don't have the opportunity to organically see the downfall of that. You just are told this is why this person is that way. And I just don't believe it when it comes to Luke. And Rey, there should have been more conflict there. With Rose and Canto Bight and Finn, it was an unnecessary side excursion that didn't go anywhere because they didn't end up accomplishing anything. When you watch the Canto Bight whole thing, nothing actually happens in Canto Bight. Nothing actually takes place. The whole sort of goal that they're trying to do, they don't actually end up accomplishing it at all. So it was an absolutely unnecessary side excursion that plays out nothing more than a PSA for animal cruelty. And Finn was too strong of a character to have him sidelined with this character of Rose. No disrespect to Kelly Marie Tran. I think she's a fine actress. But we're talking about the character of Rose, which was introduced to be sort of a love interest for Finn, but that it didn't feel organic. It didn't feel earned, right? And it felt like a strange thing to have Finn, who's a very strong character, off with Rose on this excursion. And Maz was underused but when it comes to the actual sort of structure issues, it for me, it's always been and always will be that this second act feels very much like what was taken with what JJ had set up was like, I don't like this. I don't like what JJ's done. I don't like Snoke. I don't like this. I don't like that. So I'm going to start again. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you can't do that. You have to honor what's come before. And the analogy I often use is, you've heard me say this. It's like me saying to you, or you saying to me, once upon a time, there was an old man who was sitting on a park bench. It was a beautiful sunny day. He was feeding pigeons. And then you pass it off to me. And I have to honor that, right? But instead, what I do is I say, well, it wasn't an old man. It was a young boy. And it wasn't a park bench. It was a football stadium. And it wasn't pigeons. It was, eagles. And it wasn't a nice day. It was a rainy day. And you can't do that. Whether you agree with the creative decisions I've made or not, it is irresponsible to come in and then start again and end the second act on hope and prosperity, which actually in literature is not how you construct the second act of a 3-act play. There's reasons for that. It's not my opinion. These are quantifiable facts. There's reasons why in theater and in, trilogies that are telling a story over 3 films. I mean, look at Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, right? There's reasons why these acts are structured in the ways they are, right? There's a very specific reason for it. And with The Last Jedi, that doesn't mean there weren't some cool things in The Last Jedi that I liked or that was kind of interesting. But as the second act of a 3-act play, it had fundamental structure issues and tonal issues that just didn't work. And I didn't believe in the justification for them. If this was like, look at The Rise of Skywalker, something that I actually thoroughly enjoyed. Now, the reason I enjoyed The Rise of Skywalker is not because I don't have standards. It's because I knew that at the end of The Last Jedi, The Rise of Skywalker could only be so much. And it shocks me that there are so many people out there that were expecting this to be anything more than what it is. It was never going to be the movie it should have been. And the reason is because JJ had to put a second and third act all in one movie. That's why you hear people saying it feels like 2 or 3 movies in one. Kind of feels like a second and a third. Yes, because The Last Jedi is essentially another first act. That is why you have The Rise of Skywalker feeling the way it does. Right or wrong, they should have done this, they should have done that. I understand that. But that's why it feels that way. And in reality, I don't believe that Palpatine was going to be there from the beginning. I don't believe that at all. I think that was damage control because Ryan killed off Snoke. Ryan's like, oh, fuck, what are we going to do? Well, we knew that JJ wasn't going to introduce a brand new bad character, and Ren, unfortunately, because of the conflicted character and nature of his character, he wasn't built and molded and developed enough to be believed as the big baddie running the universe. He wasn't respected enough to be the big baddie running the galaxy. So you needed somebody else. You needed a complementary player, and JJ was not going to introduce somebody brand new who we have no emotional attachment to. So what does he do? He falls back on what works. And it could work, and it did work for all intents and purposes, even though it felt a little rushed. But really, here's some food for thought for you. Let's say that the Emperor was always in the cards, right? Well, how cool would it have been if the reason why Luke is on the island and the reason why he stayed there is not just because one of his nephew, he felt something in his nephew. He's felt something in all sorts of people, right? And he felt guilty about his nephew, and he cuts himself off and he fucks off. Well, he wasn't very... If that's all it takes, well, the dude wasn't the guy I thought he was. Like, holy shit, man. Like, fucking, remember what you've learned, Tap in, speak to Yoda, speak to Obi-Wan, do something. Like, what the fuck? Like, come on. Anyway, let's say he goes there, right? And he's there on the island. And again, I'm not saying that they have to do this. I'm just saying this is more indicative of how a second act would have played out. Had JJ done this from the beginning and wanted to use Palpatine, let's say Snoke is still dead, or Snoke is a puppet. He doesn't even have to die. Snoke doesn't even have to die to be a puppet of Palpatine. How cool would it have been if the second act, The Last Jedi, we find out that Luke knows more. Luke actually has discovered that Palpatine is still alive, but he doesn't want to tell anybody yet because he doesn't want to put fear across the galaxy, and he's there working through the process. He's, looking through the Jedi text, and he's there and he's trying to figure shit out. And, he's communicating with Yoda and Obi-Wan, and there's this secret shit going on behind the scenes that nobody knows about. And then this young girl named Rey shows up with this fucking lightsaber, and it's almost like, it's time. It's time. But he knows, oh my fucking God, you're a Palpatine. Do you know what I'm saying? But he doesn't tell her that. And then the whole story starts to move forward in a very sort of interesting way, where at the end of the second act, it ends with us finding out that Rey is a Palpatine. That's where it ends. The second act actually, where we're like, oh shit. So you can nurture that. You can have all that shit that was crammed into The Rise of Skywalker. You can have it breathe in a second act so it feels earned. It feels organic. And then at the end of that movie, Rey is gone with Ren, right? The galaxy is in despair. Luke is like, oh my fucking God, no, that she's a Palpatine, and holy shit, she's going to become Empress Palpatine and all that. Wow. right? And then you leave the theater, thinking, what the fuck's going to happen next, right? I'm not saying it has to go that way. I'm just giving you examples of how second act of 3-act plays go. They're supposed to leave you feeling uncertain. They're supposed to leave you feeling that all hope is lost. Not just the audience, but the characters as well. That all hope is lost. What are we going to do? Look at the end of Empire, right? Luke just found out that the biggest, baddest guy in the galaxy is his dad. His dad. What does that say about him? He's not just, oh my God, that's my father. He's questioning himself, his future, his destiny. Is my destiny with my father? Is it not? What the fuck, right? Oh my God. It's one of the greatest reveals and endings, like as Nick P says, of all time. And it's so dark, and it's like, oh my God. And then Han Solo is frozen in carbonite. I love you. I know. Are we ever going to see him again? Is he going to die? He's being taken to Jabba's palace. What the fuck is going on? What's going to happen? Holy shit. That is how second acts go. It doesn't have to be verbatim. Like there's not I don't mean that there's a strategic way that you have to write it in terms of, Rey has to do this and Kylo has to do this. I'm not saying that. I'm talking about the formula and the ingredient of the overall tone. And The Last Jedi didn't have any of that. It was dark in the sense of we had moody, drunk Luke, but the rest of the movie was strange tonally. It was unusual. They were having a slow motion chase in space. Canto Bites PSA about animal cruelty. Rose and Finn's weird shoehorned in love, which I didn't buy. I mean, look at the way that Finn responds to the kiss that that Rose gives. It's weird and awkward and some great visuals, some great music. But it was as if I was watching another first act. It didn't end with me thinking to myself, how the hell are they going to get out of this one? I didn't feel that. The resistance being whittled down to, 15 people is not enough for me to ponder over 2 years. How the hell are they going to... Who fucking cares? Who cares, right? There needs to be some personal character development, right? Some personal character conflict that our main protagonist is contemplating. And at the end of The Last Jedi, Rey is just as certain of who she belongs to and who she is going to reside with than she was at the beginning of The Last Jedi, which is not right. Luke, look at him when at the end of Empire, when Darth Vader is speaking to him through the Force, right? And he's like, Luke, come with me. It is your destiny, right? As he's staring out across the space, and then it dissolves into Luke, and he's in pain, and he's there, and he's like, Ben, why didn't you tell me? The confliction he's feeling. What now? What the fuck am I gonna do? Am I gonna, do I go with my dad? Do I stay here? What am I going to do? There's none of that in The Last Jedi. None of that. There's no character conflict and struggle and questions, bigger picture questions that our main protagonist is asking not just of people, but of herself or himself at the end of that movie. And the final shot is not one of uncertainty, it's one of hope. And it's strange. It's very strange. And Rian Johnson should not have been allowed to execute that script. He's an incredibly talented writer and director. Incredibly talented. And there are some good and interesting things in The Last Jedi. The Force projection was really cool. The Force sort of Force bond, talking to each other, seeing each other, which JJ carried over and expanded on in The Rise of Skywalker, was very interesting and cool. Force Skype, as some people call it, right? But tonally, I just had a very difficult time believing in it. It had nothing to do... I mean, look, would I have loved to have seen Luke tear shit up and destroy and, take down a Star Destroyer? Sure. But that wasn't my problem. That wasn't my issue with the movie. I didn't have any issues with not seeing that at the end of the day because I was so confused on the justification for him basically abandoning his sister, which there's no doubt over that 30 years he would have had a great relationship with. Right? We have no evidence that their relationship was, strained or poor or a little, you know what I mean? Where it would have been sort of like, no, I gotta fuck off. I feel way too guilty. I failed. I'm an asshole. I suck. I'm a piece of shit. I don't care about you guys. I'm just so upset. And so I'm just going off over here to die. And you guys just gotta defend it. I don't believe he would do that to Leia. I don't believe it. I just don't. And partially because we didn't get to see that 30 years, right? Maybe there are things that happen in that 30 years that you jump to The Last Jedi and maybe it becomes more believable. But Rian Johnson's justification for it, I don't buy. I don't believe that at that moment, Luke sensing the darkness in Kylo, in Ben, would have thrown him completely into decisions that, and even the destruction of his Jedi temple. Would that have upset him? Yes. Would it have affected him? Absolutely. Would it have made him ponder certain things? 100%. But I believe because of how Luke was created, the character's arc and the morals and the messages that the message that he's learned about himself over the previous 3 films, I believe that in a moment of despair, he would have reached out to his sister. Maybe not right away, but certainly I don't believe that he would have cut himself off from the Force, and went there to die. It felt like that was shoehorned in. This is what people expect of Luke, so I'm just going to do this. And it's like, well, hang on a sec here. Are people going to believe it? You can do that, but we would have to see other evidence of Luke's character. We'd have to see his downfall and actually getting to that point. Maybe it would have been more believable had we actually had a film where we saw him training Ben. We saw the struggle. We saw the destruction of the Jedi Temple. We saw this. Maybe him and Leia completely disagreed on how they should be training each other or how Luke should be training her and fight something. Maybe it's just a whole Jerry Springer shit show of a family. I mean, maybe it is, but because we didn't see that, I just don't believe it. So it was tonally weird. And then Luke to actually, I find the title of the movie, The Last Jedi, strange. I know what it means, but then Luke's not the last Jedi, right? He's not. And I think for the film to have more weight, I think maybe a better decision would have been actually Luke being the last Jedi as we know it, and then Rey is the beginning of something new. If they were to make more films, they still could go in that direction. But Luke not being the last Jedi sort of, I understand why. It's too embedded into the pop culture consciousness. Jedi is Star Wars, you know what I mean? And I totally get why doing away with that title and coming up with something new like Skywalker would be a bit risky. I understand that. But I found the title of the movie by the end of the movie strange. It just was weird to me. Another thing that I think was a lost opportunity was I actually think that, and I understand that, of course, we had no idea that Carrie Fisher was going to die at the end of 2016. But I think maybe it would have been better because of the circumstances to actually reverse the Holdo situation and make that Princess Leia, who sacrificed herself to save everybody. I still believe that would have been an incredible way to go out. I think that would have been moving and visually stunning as it currently is, and allowed Luke to survive into the next movie. And then, of course, passing on the torch. But then if Luke were to survive, it makes the title of the movie even more strange. I mean, there's a lot of different ways. Like, in order for The Last Jedi to feel more like a second act, as you can clearly see from this rant that I've been going on here for almost an hour, there's a lot of structural issues that you would have to go back and sort of start from the beginning to kind of, restructure. But the point of this video and is just that it doesn't mean that there are not people that don't like the film. And that's great. If you like the movie, that's great. That's great. I applaud you for liking it. That's awesome. But for me and for many people I know, the issues with The Last Jedi cannot all be boiled down to 40-year-old fanboy expectations that were not met. When you actually do understand how stories are written, especially 3-act plays, because that's what it is, then you understand sort of how strange The Last Jedi feels for many of us watching the movie. Now, that doesn't mean that there are not people out there that did have 40-year-old fanboy expectations that were not met. Certainly that exists, and certainly there are people out there that's all they wanted. But they're not mutually exclusive to each other, is what I'm saying. There are, when you understand how the 3-act structure works, and then you watch TLJ with that understanding in mind, and I encourage you to read up on it, but don't just, read a blurb, like read up on how these acts are fundamentally rolled out. And then you watch it again with a different lens, it is a little perplexing. It is strange. And it doesn't mean that there aren't people that aren't going to enjoy it. And it doesn't mean that there weren't some interesting ideas in TLJ. But fundamentally, it felt like another first act. Like we killed off Snoke, we tossed a lightsaber over the shoulder, so Snoke didn't matter, the lightsaber didn't matter. Rey has no conflict really at the end of the day. Kylo is really no further along than he was at the end of TLJ than he was at the end of The Force Awakens, other than the fact that Snoke is not there anymore. There's a lot of strange, and it ends on a prosperous, happy note. I mean, how many in the chat room, and I really want to know this, how many in the chat room, and be honest, felt like when you left The Last Jedi, and you can comment below in the comments section as well, how many of you felt leaving The Last Jedi, let's put your disappointment aside, let's put your anger aside, for those of you that didn't like the movie, but how many of you felt like, I don't really care about what happens next? I don't like okay. I don't really care. I'm not excited to see what happens next. I'm not eager to see what happens next. How many people actually felt that way? I'd be very curious to know how many people felt that way, and then I'll explain sort of, why likely that is. I mean, there's a multitude of reasons. You say, well, I hated the movie, so I didn't give a shit about it, right? I didn't like it, so I just didn't give a fuck about what happened next. But I felt like I didn't care what happens next. Things felt resolved. The Disco Dev said it perfectly. He didn't care about what happened next because it felt like things were resolved. Even though when you actually watch TLJ and you actually break it down, there is some sort, you see them there on the Falcon and the lightsaber's broken and all, and that's another thing. The lightsaber is broken, right? The reason why it felt resolved is because of the way that Johnson structured the moral of the story. He had a moral and message all on its own within The Last Jedi. The Last Jedi's message is kill the past, right? You don't need it. Fuck the past. And ultimately, we're trying to get to a goal where we show that anybody can be a Jedi. Anybody can be it doesn't matter where you come from, who you are, what sex you are, you can have the Force within you and you can be a Jedi. Okay, pretty cool message, right? But why is that in the second act? and it didn't feel like Johnson understood that you cannot have a standalone movie in the middle of a 3-act play. You're supposed to be, now you could argue and say, well, if there was a plan, I understand that. But that is why Ryan should not have been allowed by Kennedy and Bob Iger to make the creative decisions he made. Somebody should have said, hang on a sec here, cool idea, but we need to sort of, take the notes that JJ had, and he should not have been allowed to toss them out. He doesn't have to follow everything, but JJ had story direction notes. Here's what I'm thinking, right? It's not fleshed out. That's your job. Your job is to flesh this out, right? And that's how you make it your own. But because I was the beginning man in, and I set this up, here's what I'm thinking. So we got Snoke here, right? So this is what I'm thinking. And then you run with it, and here's this, and here's that, and here's this. Here's some notes and ideas to get you going, right? To sort of push you in the direction. And Johnson said, no, I don't want any of this. And out it went. Here's what I'm doing. You can't do that. You cannot do that when you are the second person in a 3-act play. You can't do that. Imagine that happening in, imagine that happening in The Empire Strikes Back. Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. Imagine, what the hell is everything that now there is no ring and the ring doesn't matter and what the fuck is going, it feels strange. It's a very unusual film. It's brilliantly shot. The cinematography is fantastic, TLJ, I'm talking about. But it is a very tonally strange movie that does not feel organic coming off of The Force Awakens. And the structure issues, I just don't believe, I don't buy into. And that ultimately is why when you bring back J.J. Abrams, he's gone back to the tone and the shift of what The Force Awakens was. It's unfortunate that J.J. just didn't do all 3 films. Now, would we have gotten Emperor Palpatine? Probably not. Because I think JJ was setting up Snoke to be the big badass. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Not getting Palpatine in the end wouldn't necessarily have been a bad thing because you can still make Rey a Palpatine without bringing Palpatine back. Now, bringing Palpatine back is really cool, but you don't necessarily have to have her back or have him back in order for Rey to be a Palpatine. I believe much more that Rey may have always been a Palpatine than Palpatine actually always in the cards to come back. But I think, had JJ written all 3, done all 3, it doesn't mean you would have liked it, but at the very least, there would have been some consistency. I mean, a lot of people don't like the prequels, but when you watch them, there's definitely consistency. When you watch Attack of the Clones, it feels like a second act in a 3-act play. And now it's a bit different in the sense because in Revenge of the Sith, the resolution is very dark because there's a very specific downfall. It is the antagonist's story, not the protagonist's story. When you're telling a 3-act play where the antagonist is your central figure, at the end of the 3rd act, generally instead of prosperity, you have uncertainty. Because it is the antagonist's story. When you're telling the story from the protagonist's perspective, your 3rd act is always the resolution and hope. I'm back. A little bit of a hiccup there. Apologies. Again, these things are not set in stone, but it is definitely something that is sort of the golden rule. It's like, anyway, I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything in my notes here. I had some notes. Yeah, I think I got all that. Yeah, I got all that too. Yeah, I got all that. Let me wrap this up here before we head to the chat room by just saying that if you like The Last Jedi, that's great. But unfortunately, because of the many things that I've talked about here, ultimately, I think that's why a lot of people didn't like it. Because it took too many creative avant-garde liberties that didn't feel earned or organic. And it left us on a note that we didn't know how to feel. It was, I don't know what this is. And The Rise of Skywalker, unfortunately, was only going to be so good. You know, I've said this ad nauseum. It was only going to be what it was. At the end of the day, The Rise of Skywalker should have been 2 movies. It should have been. And at the very least, if not 2 movies, 3 hours. It should have been that, to allow much of the things that JJ was introducing to have time to breathe. And if you did not like The Rise of Skywalker, then you can thank The Last Jedi for that. Because ultimately, that is why that's why The Rise of Skywalker feels the way it does. Rushed, a lot in there. You know, it feels like Rey finding out she's a Palpatine should have been like the end of the second act. And yeah, that's right. Because it essentially is 2 movies in one. Oh, my camera's messing up here. I don't know why. Let me try this again. 1 second. Hang on 1 sec. Let me, my camera, I don't know why my camera's doing that. My camera likes to do that. 1 second, guys. You'll still be able to hear me, but I'm going to add my camera back, because sometimes this happens with my camera, and I don't know why it does, but it does. So there we go. We are back. We are back. That should do it. Hopefully that'll handle it. But yeah, so it's just, I think it's so important that the bottom line here is this: the Star Wars sequel trilogy is done. It's over. There were a lot of problems with it. And you could go back to the very beginning and say that there should have been a plan. And I agree with you, there should have been a plan. 100%. Yeah, there should have been a plan. But Rian Johnson should also not have thrown out JJ's notes. You know, and it's just, I just want people to understand that the reason why The Rise of Skywalker feels the way it does is because of The Last Jedi. Really, at the end of the day, if you wanted The Rise of Skywalker, or whatever it was going to be called, to feel more organic and in line with The Last Jedi, then you should have just gotten Rian Johnson to do the 3rd movie. Really, you should have. Because then tonally it would have felt maybe better. Maybe it would have been a better movie. You know, maybe it would have felt better. But you got JJ, you got Johnson, who just did whatever the fuck he wanted to do, and then JJ trying to make up for it and trying to piece it all together so there's some sort of consistency. You know, you have 2 first acts in this movie, and then you have a 2nd and 3rd act in the 3rd film. It's so unfortunate that turned out to be the case. But let me just end before I head to the chat here by saying that, yeah, there are, when I say I didn't like The Last Jedi, it's because of the structure issues that I have in regards to how a 3-act play goes. And because of where we end up, where the beginning of the movie is, where we end up, it's strange. And it's a very strange formula. It's a very strange feeling tonally. There's decisions that just don't make sense, and I don't believe in the characters that they would do these types of decisions. And those are the issues I have. And that's not 40-year-old fanboy expectations. That's, 3-act narrative playwriting 101. These are things we can quantify and actually point to, and say, well, here's why we do this. We write second acts like this, especially in the realm of fairy tales, which is what Star Wars is, especially from the perspective of the protagonists, which is what Star Wars is. We write it this way so our 3rd act can be this. That doesn't mean that you have to, again, write, you gotta copy things or that it's set in stone, but the formula, the ingredient is set in stone. And good writing comes down to understanding characters and their traits and their behaviors, and understanding that if we're going to take a character in a different direction, that behavior must be earned. We can't just throw this on them and say, well, here's why. I don't believe it. I don't buy it. It has to be earned. You can't just be avant-garde for the sake of it because you know everybody is thinking you're going to go one way, so you're going to go another. That's bad writing decisions. That's poor creative choices. And it's unfortunate because Johnson is a hell of a filmmaker. But I think Johnson at the end of the day he's too much of an eclectic thinker, which is not a bad thing, but I just mean he's too much of his own horse. You know, he's too much of his own sort of experimental, which is really cool when you're the first man in, right? Like Looper, really awesome. Knives Out, brilliant, right? If he wants to start his own trilogy on something, that might be cool because he's setting the foundation. But coming in and just thinking, I'm just going to do whatever the heck I want to do is something I don't agree with. He even said a quote too. There was something he said a while back. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, well, Star Wars is all about this, that, and the other. And I think it's important that we do our own thing and, we make and it's like, yeah, but not as the second man in. You don't have the liberty to do that. It's not like each movie is its own separate story. You don't have the liberty to do that. You can't do that as the second person in. You have to follow what's come before. And what I mean by that is that you have to take what they've set and expand on it in a organic, believable way. Not toss everything out and then start again. Anyways, I'm repeating myself here. It's just I feel passionately about it because I see a lot of people online, not everybody, but I see a lot of people online who I think don't understand that there's more issues with TLJ than just fanboy expectations when you understand how 3-act plays are written. There is a peculiar, tonal, weird thing about that movie with characters and structure. There just is. And that's something we can quantify. That doesn't mean that you don't have to not like, or that you don't have to not like the movie. You can love the movie and maybe it worked for you. That's great. But for those of us who have issues with it, that's part of the problem. And that's why I enjoyed The Rise of Skywalker, because I was like, well, this is, I love it. I think it's great. Because it's exactly what I expected it was going to be, because it could only be so much. Anyways, let's go to the chat room here, and let's talk to some people and see what's going on. Super chat from Jason Knight says, I feel that what JJ intended, he was on that island for a reason. Well, that's a great question. Yes, he was on the island for a reason. And Luke, we have an idea about what Han said, right? And certainly the difficulty that he had with Ben Solo and the failure of his Jedi temple may have prompted him to seek guidance, to seek advice, to find, to sort of reset himself. I absolutely agree with that. But to cut himself off from the Force, to say, fuck my sister, I don't care about my sister, I don't care about any of these people or anything like that. I mean, really, at the end of the day, whatever sort of self-doubting Luke was having, which there's no doubt he was having a little bit, which was one of the reasons why he went to the island, when Rey showed up on that island, that should have been the end of it. The recognizing that lightsaber, feeling the death of Han Solo, which really is when he turns around and he takes off his hood. That's what I thought. The pain, look at that again. The pain he's feeling in his face, the tears he has in his eyes. It's almost like, I knew this day would come again. It's time. It's time. He felt the death of Han Solo. He felt his sister needed him. This girl who shows up with his lightsaber is a fucking Palpatine. He probably could feel it. You know what I'm saying? It's to structure it in the ways that they did, and the justification for it felt weird. I just did not believe that Luke would take it to those lengths. It did not feel earned. Super chat from Tommy Ricknell says, it feels good to leave TLJ behind me. JJ delivered 2 great movies, and it could have been overall a great trilogy. Time to move on, and hopefully we will see a great and strong Star Wars movies in the future. Well, you know what? Hey, man, I mean, I hear you. I think The Force Awakens was, it was what it needed to be to get Star Wars back on track. And I thought The Last Jedi derailed that. Nobody had issues, folks. Nobody had issues with this new Star Wars trilogy to the degree that they have them now until after The Last Jedi. And there's a reason for that. Let me see here. Lauren Downing says, Dave is never toxic. He appreciates everyone's entitled to their own opinion. When we agree, it's good like gravy. When we don't, he says so. Of course, yeah, you're absolutely right, Lauren. You don't have to agree. You don't have to agree with me. What I want to do on this channel, and what I've always tried to do, is I'll offer my opinion, but I always try to come at it from a place of spitting. That's what happens when you're yapping. I always try to come at it from a place of an informed opinion, which is why when I wanted to talk about, I got a weird hair in my mouth. It's my cat's hair. Now when I always try to come at it from a place of an informed opinion to give you guys something to think about. I don't just say The Last Jedi was shit. I say, well, hang on. Here's why these things didn't work, and here's why the structure didn't work because of the type of films these things are. And that's really important, to be able to do the best I can to justify my reasoning for it. At the end of the day, it didn't work because of the structure and character issues, not just with Luke, but with Rey. Like I said, nothing happens to Rey. There's no conflict that Rey's yes, there's, the resistance is down to like 15 people, like I said, but so what? Rey is still certain of her destiny in terms of who she wants to side with. That should never have happened. Can you imagine the feeling you would have felt leaving the theater after watching TLJ if Rey went with Ren, but you can see the struggle in her, like she just doesn't want to be there, and Luke is down there, and they're firing all those fucking lasers, and Rey is in the ship, and she's crying because she knows that maybe, oh my God, but Ren is the only gets fucking shit, and we know that she's a Palpatine, and the fuck Broom Boy, get him out of there. Can you imagine? And then Finn and Poe are like, what are we gonna do? And you're like, holy shit, it's up to us. We gotta save Rey. Rey! You throw another one in there because that's all he seems to do. Rey! Like, no! And they fly off, into the stratosphere. It's like, what the fuck's gonna happen? That is, you don't have to do what I've said there. Again, okay? Because I know that can be perceived, as somebody said, you just sound like you're doing your fanboy stuff. It doesn't have to be that. I don't care if I see that or not. I care about seeing the structure of a second act. That's what I care about at the end of the day, and I'm just offering suggestions. Let me see here. Super chat from Jason Nike, a very generous one. Thank you, Jason. Much appreciated. Says, I feel like Rey's arc always was she was going to be a new breed of Jedi. For sure. Where she would tap into the dark side without giving into the dark. I think that would resolve all 9 movies for true balance in the Force. It's one of the reasons why I love that she's a Palpatine. I love that. It's one of my favorite things about the rise of Skywalker. Do I wish that would have been revealed in the second act and we had more time to breathe and we can believe all this stuff? Yes. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, but I love that for the reasons you said. I mean, even though we've never seen a gray Jedi in the Star Wars universe in terms of the films, live action, for all intents and purposes, as you've heard me say in a couple of videos on this channel, Rey is as close to a gray Jedi as we've gotten. And for those of you that don't know, and I don't even believe actually the word gray Jedi is canon. I think that's from the EU, right? But anyway, it's essentially somebody who is able to walk the line between the light and the dark and tap into the dark if they need to, without actually being seduced by it. That's the Cliff Notes version. And Rey being a Palpatine, having that dark blood in her, but choosing to side with the light and choosing to honor the name Skywalker and move on. It's a great message, and I think it's really cool, and we've seen what she's capable of with that lightning that came out. I think it's really cool. I love that angle. It's so unfortunate that we didn't have more time with it and more time with seeing her discover that about her. But if they had had a plan, for those of you that say they never had a plan, or if they had had a 3-hour movie or maybe 2 extra movies, or if the second act had been done, we would have had that time, right? I mean, that's the shit that you find out. You don't find out a twist like that in the 3rd act. Like, that doesn't, a twist of that magnitude, right? That is the Luke, I am your father, excuse me, because he doesn't say Luke. No, I am your father. That is, listen, it doesn't compare to that. I'm just saying the Raise a Palpatine is the I am your father moment in the new trilogy, right? It doesn't compare, but that's the moment in this new trilogy. So that should have happened, really. That's a great second act cliffhanger. Oh my God, are you kidding me? Now what? Where's she gonna go? Yeah, it's awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. Nicholas Nicholas Quinwans? Maybe I'm probably butchering that, buddy. Before Finn went under in The Rise of Skywalker, he was going to tell Rey he was Force sensitive. Yes, according to J.J. Abrams, that is what he was going to say. I actually think it's a very strange thing to say in that moment. That's a creative decision that I do not agree with. I think having Finn Force sensitive is bang on. But I don't agree that that's what he should. That's not what you tell somebody in that moment. In that moment, when you think you're going to lose your life to somebody or in front of somebody, or you both are going to lose, generally you want to tell them something that you've always wanted to tell them on a personal level. That's, it's more of the, I love you, I've always respected you. It's like being on your deathbed, right? Because what does it matter if you're, I'm Force sensitive? Well, but we're dying. So what does it matter? I just, okay. Now, do I agree with making Finn Force sensitive? Yes, 100%. And that's something that I think JJ alluded to and sort of tipped the hat to a little bit in The Force Awakens that was completely abandoned in the Last Jedi. What Rian Johnson did with the character of Finn in The Last Jedi is inexcusable. It's so unfortunate that a character as strong as Finn, as well liked as Finn in The Force Awakens, with so much potential, was sidelined for a excursion that ultimately went nowhere. It went nowhere. 100% nowhere. Because the goal that they set out to do, they never accomplished, other than freeing some, whatever the fuck they were called. And then you got this PSA thing. It was garbage. It was very, very strange. Very weird. But I agree. I love the Force sensitive thing. I think it's great. Let me see here. Nick P was here, says, right, not necessarily the story, but the right edit to the existing story. I think the edit that should have been made. I'm not sure what you're talking. Forgive me. I don't know if you're talking to somebody else in the chat or me. Robert Kitzmiller says, Dave, if Snoke and Luke don't die in TLJ, how does the climax play out between Luke, Rey, Kylo, and Snoke in The Rise of Skywalker? Can you give us an idea? That's a good question. Well, like I said, there's very little doubt in my mind that the Emperor was always going to come back. I think once Snoke was dead, the Emperor was always going to come back. But I think had Snoke survived in The Last Jedi, then he just would have been your big baddie. You sort of have to go back to the beginning of The Last Jedi and make a decision on which of your legendary characters are going to survive. Is it going to be Luke or is it going to be Princess Leia? Because that ultimately is going to then dictate how and where you move with the legendary character into The Rise of Skywalker. Ultimately, I think... Okay, let me give you an idea. So let's say the movie's still called The Last Jedi. We know that Snoke, even in the opening crawl of The Force Awakens, Luke Skywalker, I believe, is referred to as The Last Jedi. That's important. In The Force Awakens, Snoke refers to Luke as The Last Jedi. He says it. He actually says it. That's important. So the next movie being called The Last Jedi is good. I like that. But he actually should have been The Last Jedi. That's the ballsy move I would have taken. And I would have had Luke... You can play Luke's character out very similar, but I would have changed the justification for why he's on the island, of course. I don't believe in that character development at all. I don't buy that he would do that. Having a down day, having a bad day at the office, sure. Completely fucking off? No. It doesn't jive with the morals and the messages of what he's learned through Obi-Wan and Yoda and his own experiences, with his father. Anyways, I said all this, right? I just have to emphasize this shit because it's so important. I'm flabbergasted that Johnson would take it to this extreme. It's just weird. Anyway, you still have Rey go to the island, and how it plays out is, more or less, let's see, Dave, if Snoke and Luke don't die in TLJ, how does the climax play out between Luke and the rise of Skywalker? I see what you're saying. If Luke don't... I think Luke still does have to die. I think Luke still does have to die in The Last Jedi. Because I think that's you see, how I would have set it up is I still would have had Luke die, but I would have had us finding out that Rey is a Palpatine in The Last Jedi. Think of that. Think of that for a moment. Luke dies. It's earned, right? It feels like, it's like, oh my God, no, but it feels like, wow, okay, cool, but like, whoa, holy shit, right? Luke dies. We find out Rey's a Palpatine. Oh my God. So The Last Jedi is gone. Rey's a Palpatine and has gone with Ren. What the fuck? Fanboy? Maybe. But I think you'd be hard pressed to find anybody who wouldn't look at that and go, that's interesting. From a second act perspective, that's interesting. That's interesting. From a character narrative perspective, it's really interesting. Luke dies, doing what he did. Maybe he's actually there. He force, projects, whatever. The only thing I would change, of course, is that I actually think I would have Luke, he would... It's so complicated to answer off the cuff because I find myself, as I'm beginning to answer, I have to backtrack into the narrative further to make my answers justified. And that's why so much, it's like writing a script. For those of you that have written, you'll be working on a scene, right? And you'll be like, I can't, why is this not? And then you'll find that if you go back 2 or 3 pages and you work a few little things back there, suddenly you're like, now I can go back to page 35, and now all of a sudden it makes more sense. And I find myself actually having this sort of fight in my mind as I'm actually talking to you guys about this. But I think it's important that Luke remains the last Jedi. He does sacrifice himself, but at the same time, he sacrifices himself by joining the resistance, coming back to save his sister, to save everybody. But there's something that happens where he has to sacrifice himself for the greater good. Very much like he did in The Last Jedi, to a degree, I guess. But it would have to be from the perspective of him joining the fight much earlier on, because I believe that's what Luke would do. Luke wouldn't abandon his sister. I don't believe he would. And I certainly don't believe that after he feels the death of Han Solo at the hands of his nephew, that he would just fuck off and forget about it. Now, according to TLJ, he didn't feel that because he's cut himself off from the Force, which is just something that Luke wouldn't do. So it would have to be done in that manner. But where it heads to is The Last Jedi is gone, and the uncertainty that exists. That is a fascinating, interesting ending for me. And then, of course, you allude to the fact that now Palpatine is going to rise because we have a new Palpatine. Oh my God, what the fuck now? But because Finn is Force sensitive, right, he begins to sort of he steps up in the rise of Skywalker, and so does Poe, and it leads on this journey of tapping into Rey's doubt, and of course an epic battle ensues, and Rey leaves Ren, and the whole fucking thing, and it's a great question, but it's a tough one to answer right off the cuff, because there's so many layers that would have to be reworked and changed to make something like that feel organic. But Snoke, I would remain as the big baddie. And then the development of Snoke, we would find out more about him, where he comes from. Maybe he was a disciple of Palpatine. Maybe he was, or maybe you do find out that he's Palpatine, but you bring the Darth Plagueis angle into it a bit more, right? You don't just allude to it, which I thought was a cool line, by the way, at the beginning of the rise of Skywalker, in the sense of, the dark side of the Force is a pathway to many abilities some consider to be unnatural. I mean, that is definitely alluding to the fact that, okay, Palpatine here, he obviously cheated death somehow. And that's something that George Lucas created. That was delivered in the opera scene in Revenge of the Sith. So the fact that Palpatine falls down this shaft at the end of Return of the Jedi, there should have always been some sort of doubt that he could come back. I'm not saying that's the right decision to make. I'm just saying that there always should have been some sort of doubt. And that wasn't set up by Johnson or Abrams. That was set up by Lucas in Revenge of the Sith. That it's heavily alluded to here that Uncle Palps may have figured out how to cheat death because of Darth Plagueis. So, I mean, him being alive is actually not a problem. It just feels a little shoehorned in, right? Because of what Johnson did to Snoke. I think it would have been a more interesting angle if you had kept Snoke there, that you reveal along the way through your second act. Maybe at the end of the second act, it's revealed that Snoke is Palpatine, and it's revealed that Rey is a Palpatine. Oh, it's like, oh my God. Think about that. Think about that for a moment. Luke's gone. He sacrifices himself in an epic fucking way. He comes back to save his sister, and earlier on in the film, we find out that the reason why he's on the island is not because of, because he's cut himself off from the Force. He doesn't give a fuck about anything. He's gone there to die. No, he's gone there because he has sensed that Palps is back. There's something wrong. There's something there. Rey comes, the lightsaber. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Holy shit. Oh my God. All this, just this, we totally rework that. Okay. And then it all is heading towards this moment where it's revealed that, okay, Luke's gone. Snoke is Palpatine reborn, so to speak. And Rey's a Palpatine. And that's where The Last Jedi ends. I would have left the theater thinking, oh my God, how are they going to get out of this one? The anticipation for episode 9 would have been off the charts. Oh my God. Oh my God. He's Palpatine? She's a Palpatine? Luke is gone? What the hell now? That, for those of you that are feeling, and not everybody in the chat or watching is necessarily going to like that, but again, I'm using this as an example. It doesn't have to be this. This is an example that is indicative of the 3-act structure. For those of you in the chat or watching after that may be thinking to yourself, oh, that's much better. Well, there's a reason for that, right? It's honoring the 3-act system by creating uncertainty before the resolution. In order for the resolution to feel like it's been paid off, a resolution needs to feel like there's a payoff. It needs to feel like you've gone through shit. You've seen shit, you've gone through shit, you've been through shit, and now there's all you've learned through that resistance is now coming to, and for the resolution to feel like it's been worth it, the second chapter has to feel muddied and intense and dark and like, oh, uncertain and what the hell, right? That's why you feel that way, because it is a better ending to a second. I'm not saying it has to be that ending. I'm just saying the ending I gave you, is a better ending to a second act than The Last Jedi's second act ending was. It just fundamentally is, because it aligns with the formula of how you construct 3-act plays and why they can be so effective when you go into a third act. Why a lot of people love second acts so much, because we learn the most about our characters. We see the most growth. We see the resistance. We see the big baddies. Everybody loves a bad guy, right? We see twists and turns, that are unexpected and oh my God, and that's what you would get. And that's why it might feel like, oh, that would have been cool. Now, not everybody in the chat and not everybody watching after the fact would necessarily agree with me, but for those of you that are feeling that way, that's why. Now, there's many different ways they could have gone about it. They didn't have to make Rey a Palpatine. They didn't have to make Snoke Palps or anything like that. But that's what happens, right? I mean, that is so important when you are talking about the 3-act structure. And I know I've repeated myself here a lot on this stream, but I'm doing it because I cannot help but emphasize these important points. It's not just, again, are there 40-year-old fanboys that just didn't get what they want? Yes, but it cannot just be whittled down to that. There's more to it than just that. And that is the point of what I'm trying to talk about here. Oliver Mercer says, hey, Dave, did you like Rey reserving everyone's force voices to help her? Plus through a Harrison Ford. Okay, well, yes, on the first part of your question, but I do think, and I understand that there's rumors out there with the JJ cut and all that kind of crap. I can talk about that on a different stream. But I did mention even before that news came out, funny enough, that I think we should have actually seen the Force Ghosts there. Now, I don't mean fully fleshed out Force Ghosts, but just remnants, echoes. Oh shit, oh that looked like Luke. Oh fuck, that looked like, Obi-Wan. Like, they're not fully fleshed out Force Ghosts like we saw Luke in The Rise of Skywalker, but they're sort of like just echoes, mists of her, and we see her we see them trying to uplift her, and that would have been, along with the voices, and we see Anakin, that would have been cool. I think that was needed. The disembodied voices, okay, cool, but it would have been much cooler to visually see that. The Harrison Ford returning in Rise was brilliant. It's probably my favorite scene in the entire movie because it brings full circle what JJ established in The Force Awakens. The symbolism around those two scenes and bringing it full circle is fantastic. Because as you've heard me say, I'll say it again, in Rise, that's not just Han Solo getting what he or in The Force Awakens, that's not just Harrison Ford getting what he wanted. His character's death served Ren's arc. And that's why Ren should have been far more developed and bad in TLJ. He still is conflicted, but he should have been further along than he was. Because he's now murdered his own father. And he did that to prove to everybody that he can be that badass guy. And like I said, when he said, I know what I have to do, but I don't have the strength to do it. Can you help me? He's saying to his dad, I know I need to kill your fucking ass, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it. Can you help me? And then he said, thank you, right? In Rise, it's the opposite, right? He now realizes, because of the sacrifice that his own mother made to reach out to him and ultimately save Rey's life and save his life in the process. And his father shows up in a memory, by the way. It's not a Force ghost, but shows up and they have a similar conversation. And then he says, I know what I have to do, but I don't know if I have the strength to do it. This time he really means it, and that I got choked up because I was like, oh, JJ, that's brilliant. That's a brilliant full circle move that makes the arc feel complete. I believe it. I buy it. It feels earned because I've seen the natural progression of that arc in terms of their that relationship. Now, could it have even been even better if we had had a better second act or 2 more movies? Yeah. 100%. But it was just enough There was no music, right, which was really important. Just the waves in the background, the misty, sky, the cloudy sky. It was really cool. It was the nuance of the silence in that scene was really good, because it allowed the audience to hone in and really pay attention and allow the performances to carry and sort of sell themselves rather than complimentary music. Now, there's music that eventually happens there, but I think that is really important. And then, of course, to top it off, he says "Dad" for the first time, and he's choking up and he's about to cry because he wants to say "I love you," but Han just says "I know." That was just, it was great. Yeah, it was a great scene, and absolutely probably one of, if not the best, emotional moving scenes in this entire sequel trilogy. Let's see here. Savage One says, I didn't like Solo in Rise. It was too much like a Force ghost. He wasn't a Force ghost at all. I don't understand why you would think that. I respect that you feel that way, but let me try and help you. He was not a Force ghost. First of all, he was not a Force ghost because Han Solo says, the presentation of him is not a Force ghost. He doesn't have the blue hue around him, and it's explicitly said. Kylo says, "You're just a memory," and Han Solo says, "Your memory." So it's explicitly said to the audience that this is not a Force ghost. This is Kylo Ren's subconscious speaking to him. Han Solo's not actually there. He's not actually standing in front of him. Okay? He's dead. He's not Force sensitive. He's not, Han Solo cannot return as a Force ghost because he's not that guy. He's dead. He's gone. This is Kylo's subconscious speaking to him. This is his guilt speaking to him. That's what's happening. It's not a literal conversation that he's having with his dad. It's a metaphorical almost conversation in some ways that he's happening with it, or that's happening. Not even that. It's more of it's a symbolic conversation, right? It's his guilt and his subconscious and the memory. It's the memory that he's having. It's the guilt that he feels. It's trying to make amends with the memory of his father. And it's being illustrated visually that way to you with Han Solo there. I mean, really, at the end of the day, if you want to take it literally, Kylo Ren is standing there talking to nobody. I mean, if you remove Han from the equation, it would just be, if you or I were standing there with him, we would be looking at Ren talking to nobody. He's talking to himself. You and I wouldn't see Han there, right? But he does because it's his memory. And so it's not a Force ghost, and it was never alluded to that it was a Force ghost. And it was even explicitly said that it was his memory. So hopefully that helps you out a bit to see that scene a bit differently. Ryan Webster says, I always thought Rey not taking Kylo's hand and saying no to the First Order and to Supreme Leader Kylo and saying I'm a Jedi. I always thought Rey not taking Kylo's hand in saying no to the First Order and to Supreme Leader Kylo and Jedi. Just my opinion. Love the film. You always thought what? That you always liked it or you didn't like it? I think you forgot to tell me whether you liked it or you didn't. I assume you liked it. And that's cool. That's fine. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. Robert Hernandez says, Dave, do you agree with these fans saying that Rey is a Mary Sue character? No. I don't. I don't agree with that. And the reason why I don't is because whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not, becomes irrelevant once canon is established. There isn't your canon and my canon. There is one canon. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to agree with it. That doesn't mean we have to like it. That doesn't mean we have to watch the Disney films. That doesn't mean we have to watch the new, trilogy. It doesn't mean that. In our own minds, we can say that doesn't exist. Okay, fine. That's fair. But this isn't abstract art. Okay? This is not something that you can just, this is canon. And it has been revealed in canon that Rey is the granddaughter of Emperor Palpatine, okay? Darth Sidious himself, arguably one of, if not the most powerful Sith Lord that has ever lived. She is his blood. Okay. That explains why she's been very strong from the very beginning and that she had untapped potential. Okay? That explains why she was able to tap into things relatively easy and go to dark places and tap into certain strengths or abilities that even she didn't know she had. You don't have to like that. You can think it's dog shit. That's fair. But it's canon. And it explains why this character, talking about the character, has had this level of natural ability, okay, which would only be enhanced if she actually received real training, which she was getting from Leia, would only seem it. But she has a natural, inherent ability to possess a certain level of strength and power because of where she comes from. You can think it's dog shit, you don't have to like it, but that makes her, unfortunately, no longer a Mary Sue. Now, you can say, I don't fucking care about that, she's still that. That's fine, but this isn't subjective, right? Because it is clearly explained why she is that way. That is why she's that way. So that makes her not, she's the granddaughter of Palpatine. Oh, that's fucking stupid. That's not, no, she's still Mary Sue. It's still a Mary Sue. Okay, in your own mind, fine, but that's objectively, she's actually not. It's explained that she's powerful because of this. And so she's not, no, she's not a Mary Sue. She's not. If we had never found out, if she was not Palpatine's granddaughter, and she just came from nowhere like it was leading towards, then yes, because it would be strange. Where does this come from? Which is one of the justifications why they were heading in the direction of anybody can be a Force sensitive, anybody can do this, to try and help justify why Rey is so strong. And it was feeling a little shoehorned in at that point. So, and I don't mind. I don't think that everybody who's Force sensitive necessarily has to come from somebody. I don't believe that. I actually like the message in and of itself that TLJ is sort of trying to, say. I think it's okay. It just appears in the wrong movie. It's sort of, and you can still have Rey a Palpatine and still present the idea of you don't have to be from somebody to be somebody. You can still have that. These are things that would have to be reworked. Of course, you got to go back to go forward. But no, she's not a Mary Sue. She's not. You don't have to like the reasons for it, but in canon, she's not. It was justified. She's the granddaughter of the darkest, evilest Sith Lord that's ever lived. I mean, that's why lightning came out of her hand. Untapped potential that she didn't even know she had. Let's see here. Peter Callan says, I think Rey and Finn should have been trained together by Luke, showing us the new generation of Jedi and the evolution of Luke's journey and how it spreads. That's that's a cool idea. Whatever they did with Finn, you see, and again, that second act is so important. It's so important. It's so important. And they messed up Finn's character. They messed it up. They really did. It's so important. And I would have loved to have seen, Finn should have stayed on there should have been no, if you wanted to include Rose, okay, but there should have been no Canto Bite, because that went nowhere. Rey and Finn should have just stayed on Poe and Finn should have taken command of the ship, and there should have just been this epic space battle or something, or maybe Finn, he wants to go after Rey, but can't find her, and all this just get rid of that Canto Bite shit. There's a lot more potential you could have done with Poe and even Finn, and I don't mean Finn Poe or Poe Finn, I don't mean a romantic thing, just in terms of their characters and the growth of that friendship. And that's where you want to see it. You want to see the the growth of that friendship and the resistance of all that in your second act. Zach Frederick says, yeah, but wasn't Yoda more powerful than the Emperor, and the Emperor was scared of Yoda? My friend who reads a lot of the books said that to me. Well, maybe it was. I don't read a lot of the books. I'm not interested in the books. I just go by what is canon in the films, because that is truly what is canon. I mean, most of the expanded universe is no longer canon. They're, yeah, of course, right? And they'll cherry pick certain things out to pop them in, like Thrawn and, Rebels and all that kind of jazz. But perhaps, maybe, but certainly he is the most powerful dark Sith Lord that has ever lived, which is what I said. So, you can make an argument for that. And to be the granddaughter of the most powerful dark Sith Lord that has ever lived, well, you're not a Mary Sue then. Right? I mean, it would be like, it would be like finding out that, I don't know, gee, that kid is really great at hockey. What the fuck? He's too good. He's really great. And then you find out he's Wayne Gretzky's son. Oh, okay. Well, he's no longer whatever the Mary Sue term is for a guy. It's like, oh, he's Wayne Gretzky's kid. There's probably somewhere in there some inherent abilities, right? You know what I mean? I mean, just saying, so yeah. Super chat from Big G. Thanks, buddy. Says, is Kathleen Kennedy a disaster for Star Wars? Well, it depends on how you look at it. No, from a business perspective, no. The rise of Skywalker at the end of this weekend will probably cross finally the $1 billion mark at the box office. So by all measure, it has been a success. Has it been the success they wanted relative to what Star Wars has been doing lately at the box office? No, but the Last Jedi made $1.3 billion, which was substantially lower than The Force Awakens. The Force Awakens is an anomaly. Star Wars in today's climate, even in 2015, is not a $2 billion franchise. It's not. It made $2 billion because of the anticipation that was around it. It looked like we were going to get the first real Star Wars movie for the first time in 32 years. Because despite the fact that the prequels are now being seen in a more favorable light, in 2015, most people, not everybody, most people loathed the prequels. Anyways, it was what I could do a whole thing on that. It was what it was. This looked like Star Wars. It felt like Star Wars. The grittiness of the practical effects blended in with the digital effects. It looked interesting and wow, so the anticipation was off the chain, as the kids say today. And of course, Harrison Ford back, Mark Hamill back, Carrie Fisher back, 3PO, R2, Chewie, we're home. I've never choked up so many times over a fucking trailer in my life. It made $2 billion because of the anticipation, because it was a pretty, it got Star Wars back on track. For the most part, it was a pretty good movie. It was what it needed to be. And that's why it made that much. Making $1.3 billion at the box office for TLJ is partly because it was a terrible second act, but also because the novelty had worn off. And, but statistically, we have to look at, also as well, that generally speaking in series, films make less and less as they go on. Now there are examples of sequels that have made more, but generally speaking, movies and franchises will make less the more and more they go on. And there's a variety of reasons for that. But is Kathleen Kennedy been a success? Yes, because this is show business. She is arguably one of the greatest Hollywood producers that has ever lived. Just look at her resume, right? Beyond Lucasfilm. She's about to have her fourth or fifth Star Wars movie cross $1 billion at the box office. By all measure, she has been a great success. Creatively, pleasing the fans, being a bit disjointed, not having a plan. Okay, yes, that's on that side of the coin. It's been a bit of it's been a bit discombobulating. It's been a little strange. It's been like it's been a little messy. So I think her time at Disney, at Lucasfilm, once she eventually leaves, I think even for her, I think it will be bittersweet. I think she will revel in the success that she was able to have, but she will also feel sort of, I think even her, because I think she will feel a little, I probably could have done better in the organizing. We should have done this. We should have done that. There was a lot on my plate. I made some creative decisions. I took some risks by hiring up and coming filmmakers, and it just didn't work out. And maybe in retrospect, that wasn't the best decision to make. I should have maybe gone with what was proven to give us the best probability of success in that market creatively. And then maybe once Star Wars has sort of kicked off and we have some stuff that's really firing on all cylinders, then maybe take some risks because we can afford one. I think by all measure, it depends on how you're measuring success, but I can certainly tell you from a business perspective, she has been incredibly successful. Okay, we'll go for another few more minutes here, take it to 2 hours on this stream. There was a lot to talk about in this stream, and I want to answer your questions, of course, so I do appreciate you tuning in and listening to me rant for a little bit about The Last Jedi and why it destroyed the sequel trilogy. And it fundamentally did. I mean, it's, I use harsh words there by saying destroyed in the title, but it fundamentally did. It ruined any momentum and any organic. Oh, what's going on here? That's strange. I heard a voice come in. I don't know where that voice came from. It was really, really strange. Did you guys hear that voice? I don't know where that voice came from. That was weird. I don't even know what the voice said. That was so weird. Anyway, I use harsh words like destroyed because the second act is your most important act out of a 3-act play. And if you don't get that right, if you don't stick the landing in that second act, then it doesn't matter what you do in that third act. Things are still going to be felt like you're still going to feel like something is missing. You know what I mean? If you don't stick that landing in the third act, then filmmakers can't help but feel compelled then to add so much in to make up for the mistakes that they've made in terms of the structure of what they're delivering. And that's why I use harsh words and say that it destroyed it. The Rise of Skywalker didn't destroy the sequel trilogy. It didn't. It may have just reaffirmed for some people what they don't like about it. It may have reaffirmed for some people how much they loathe Disney and Star Wars in terms of their, sequel trilogy. But it's certainly, The Rise of Skywalker is just as, like, if you watch it if The Rise of Skywalker, watching it on its own, it's entertaining, it's exciting. It's got some cool shit that happens in it, some great emotional moments. It's fine. But it's not what it should have been. It could have been epic with so much more and so much more breathing room and things that made more sense and things that felt more earned. Yes. But that's because of the screw up of the second chapter, right? So that's why I use harsh words in that regard. DMT Infinity says, Dave, if you could have played as any Star Wars character, who would you have been and why? Either Darth Vader or Han Solo. I mean, come on. You know what I mean? Or I guess Luke in some ways, but I got to go Han or Darth Vader. Oliver Mercer says, Force Ghost coming in. Perhaps it's Emperor Palps. Maybe it is. Yeah, I don't know what that was. It was like a computer voice, and it was like, I don't have anything up. I don't have like a talk text thing going on or. Very strange stuff indeed. Let's see here. Pepito El Pistolero. Pepito El Pistolero. Am I saying that right? That's a tricky one, buddy. Dave, do you think that it would have worked if Rey had actually died when she killed Palpatine? I would have been open to the idea, but the message of the film, of course, is Rey is a Palpatine, and the message and the goal, the finish line that they're trying to get to is to deliver a message of, it doesn't matter where you come from or what your blood is. You're you're what you make of yourself. And here we have the granddaughter of Hitler. We have the granddaughter of the most evilest, baddest person you can imagine that doesn't give a fuck about anything. She is rising above that to say no. No. And then she's also taking on the Skywalker name. What a beautiful honor. And what a slap in the face to any of the bad Palpatines that may be out there, that his granddaughter is taking on the Skywalker name, you know, in a symbolic nature, because she's not a Skywalker. She's a Palpatine, but she's taking on the Skywalker name. It's very symbolic, very layered, and very poetic in many ways. And it's really cool. When you look at it from the perspective of like, dude, this girl, like, she rose above that. I'm not getting into the family business. I'm rising above this and actually delivering, a message of hope that, I'm cutting this off. I'm putting an end to this Palpatine reign, and I'm a Palpatine. You know what I mean? It's really symbolic in a lot of ways. So unfortunately, if you were to have her die, you could still have it in the sense of it took a Palpatine to kill a Palpatine in the end. That's kind of cool. But just that extra icing on the cake with her burying the lightsabers, the twins on Tatooine and honoring the Skywalker, I think that's really cool. And I think it's the only thing that I would have removed is I would have removed the kiss. Now, for those of you that haven't seen it, they don't make out. It's not like they kiss and they're like, "Mwah." It's not like that. It's just a 4-second, kind of thing, right? I would have removed that. I think it's completely unnecessary, and I don't hear something. Hey, for all you out there that think that I, am just, reaming on the TLJ and I just, Dave just loves everything JJ does. No, that's not true. I like to be as objective as possible. That's a creative decision I do not agree with, because I don't believe that Rey necessarily in that moment would have kissed Kylo Ren. He's murdered billions of people, including Han Solo. What I do believe Rey would have done is in that moment smiled, because she recognized that it's Ben Solo and that he's back and that he healed her with his force power to bring her back to life. So there definitely would have been a moment of like, oh my God, like, do you know what I mean? And absolutely have Ben smile 100%. But then as they're smiling at each other and kind of like, lost in that moment of euphoria, so to speak, Ben then just collapses and dies. You don't need the kiss. The kiss feels like it's there because Reylo fans wanted it. It doesn't feel organic to what I believe would happen in that moment. I don't think she would kiss him. Now, if he survived and they went on and got married or something, I mean, maybe, but he can't survive. He was never going to survive. Ben Solo had to die, and the reason he had to die is because he's murdered. That's his sacrifice. That's his jail sentence. It's the same as Vader. Vader murdered billions of people. Billions of people he murdered, including children. He had to die. It was his sacrifice. Ben had to die. He had to die. So that I'm okay with. But the kiss part, I was like, you don't need that. You can illustrate and get across the same message that you're trying to get across without them kissing. You don't need it. So that's a decision that I wouldn't have made. But anyway, yeah, to have her die completely as well, it might have thrown off the important message that they were delivering in the end. Lee Bauer says, I seen Rise of Skywalker, love it. It's sad that Carrie Fisher is gone. 3 years later, she can finally rest. This age is over. The saga is over. Yeah, it's definitely over. And despite what you think of The Last Jedi, The Force Awakens, or The Rise of Skywalker, I just think it's important that my hope is that the toxicity that exists in the world of Star Wars fandom, and it does exist, starts to dissipate. And what I mean by toxicity, again, for those of you that may be watching even after the fact, although I find it hard to believe that people would watch me for 2 hours. But anyway, when I say toxicity, I did say it at the beginning of the stream too. When I say toxicity, I'm not talking about people who just don't like something. I'm talking about the vitriol. I'm talking about the way that certain people online have an invested interest on seeing Star Wars fail. And the confirmation bias in which their channels or comments come from. And the groupthink mentality that has plagued fandom now. That even if these channels liked The Rise of Skywalker, they cannot tell you that because they've built an identity now around hating Disney Star Wars. It's part of their business. And it becomes almost like a cult. You have all your little fans out there that watch you. Yeah, man. Yeah. What he said. Yeah. It's like you have a leader. It's like those, 80s cheesy or, 50s gangs, right? That you see. It's like, or those cartoons that you see where you got like, the mob boss, and he's like, I'll tell you to fucking shut up and sit down, you piece of shit. And then you got, the guy, his little lackey, beside him going, oh, yeah, shut up. Yeah. Good one, boss. That's almost like what YouTube channels are like now, where you'll get these people, going, yeah, fuck Star Wars, yeah, fuck that shit. And you get all their little lackeys going, oh, yeah, fuck Star Wars, yeah. Even if they like The Rise of Skywalker, they can't then come back and tell them that. They have too much riding on it. They have a vested interest, in the whole thing. That's what I'm talking about when I say toxicity, because I wish more people would not be afraid to, say they like something when they know it's not going to be popular. I like The Rise of Skywalker, and I couldn't give a frog's fat ass whether you agree with me or whether you like that I liked it or not. I don't care. I'm here to tell you what I think, and then if you don't like it, that's cool. That's okay too. And I wish more people would do that. Like, I remember leading up to Halloween 2018, because I covered that a lot, as you guys know, for those of you that are not new. There were a lot of people that figured, because I was coming off as being the way I am, and then there were a lot of people that reached out to me and said, in one way or another, you watch, he's going to fucking love the movie. You watch, he's going to do this, he's going to give it. And I said, I'm going to be honest with you. If I love the movie, I'll tell you I love it. If I don't love it, I'll tell you I don't love it. And I didn't love it. I gave it a C+. And I don't care if Blumhouse likes that, or if anybody from this, if somebody was watching me from the studio, I don't care. I'd be doing a disservice to them, to me, and to you if I just told you what you want to hear, or what I think, oh my God, you mean somebody from Blumhouse is watching? I love the movie. I don't care. And the reason why I feel confident in that is because I know that I'm not just going to stop there, right? I'm not going to say, yeah, your movie was dog shit. Why? It was fucking dog shit. Yeah, but why? It was just fucking dog shit. I'm not one of those people. I might be harsh. I might say, I just thought it was dog shit, and maybe that's not nice to hear, but then I'm going to pull it back and say, okay, well, here's why, and I'm going to tell you, and I'm going to go through the process. And I find a lot of people, there are people that do it, but a lot of people don't, because we're in a groupthink mentality and a knee-jerk, outrage culture now, where it's just, everybody's just a fucker, and it's just, and there's very little, there's no nuance anymore, right? There's no, critical thinking is essentially out the window and all that kind of jazz. So anyway, I forgot what the fuck I was going on there, but yeah. Super chat, Jason Nike says, it would have been like Dawn of the Apes, ignore Rising. That's a good point. Yeah, 100%. Would you want, Robert Kitzmiller says, would you want to see Spaceballs sequel or remake now that we've gone 6 more movies? I I don't know. Spaceballs has come and gone. Spaceballs, there should have been, the first Spaceballs didn't do very well at the box office because it was about 4 years after Return of the Jedi, so the novelty was sort of worn off. But if you were going to do a sequel to Spaceballs, which would be hard to do now without John Candy, of course, your window was like 30 years ago. It'd be weird to do a Spaceballs sequel now. A Star Wars spoof playing homage to the new films? I don't know. I don't think the new films were liked enough to see a spoof on it. I think you would run the risk of the spoof being would be seen as hatred, making fun of in a, yeah, take that, ha, yeah, sort of way, whereas spoofs are not supposed to be, they're not generally supposed to be seen that way. It's supposed to be that they're complimenting the things that we love about it, and they're poking fun at it in an all-in good fun way. Whereas I think if you were to make a spoofy film now based on the new trilogy of films, I think the broader toxicity that exists would take that and run with it as just confirmation of how much garbage they feel the sequel trilogy is, because they would look at the spoof as a literal making fun of rather than just kind of teasing all in good fun. So that's something that I think, people have to keep in mind. And I just don't think people care about it. I don't think people would care to see a spoof film on this new trilogy. But good question though. Very good question. Just going back to super chat. Big G. Oh no, I answered that one. Okay, cool. Just want to make sure I didn't miss any of the super chats. Okay, folks, that is going to do it for me on this episode of McRae Live. I appreciate you listening to me rant there off the cuff. Of course, this is an unscripted show, so I speak from the heart all the time here, and I want you guys to know that. To just basically sum up, what I've been talking about here, it's the Last Jedi's structural and character development issues that are not indicative of a second act, and I don't believe in the creative decisions that the characters have made in that movie, that it's wonky to me. So that is ultimately why it fails and has destroyed anything that would come after it. Because you've now created 2 second acts, and now we're up Schitt's Creek now, essentially without a paddle. So that's it. It falls on the Last Jedi. Hey, tune in tomorrow, 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern time. I'm talking Halloween, the future of Halloween. Is it television? Is it movies? I'm also going to talk about Halloween 3, Season of the Witch as well, and whether or not we should move in the direction of creating a remake for Season of the Witch. Is Season of the Witch something that needs to be remade? Can we remake Season of the Witch outside of Halloween? Is there untapped potential there? Find out tomorrow as I talk about that and the future of Halloween and where we want it to go. Tomorrow, 11 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining me here on this episode of McRae Live. I will see you tomorrow. Alrighty. Cheers.